A study shows that unshaved men can detect bed bugs better than women. This proves evolution, apparently. Potholer needs to be filled in on thermodynamics, and we open a few letter bombs from our viewers. All this and more coming up in this edition of Genesis Week. And a welcome to this episode of Genesis Week, the weekly program of creationary commentary on news, views, and events pertaining to the origins controversy, exclusive right here on YouTube. The Bible does not say, be ye transformed by the removal of your mind, but rather we here at Genesis Week believe God gave you a brain for a reason. And so we use our brains here in search of the truth. And remember, if you get lost in cyberspace, just punch in wazulu.com or genesisweek.com and you will find us, or click the ever so convenient subscribe link right up top. I'm your host, Ian Juby. A December 14th biology letters paper by Isabel Dean and Michael T. Siva-Joffe reported the results of an experiment where they shaved the armpits of men and women to see if they could detect bed bugs better. You can't make this stuff up.
While I'll give you this doesn't prove that Ian Juby's a liar, it does show the level of immaturity with which he approaches a serious subject.
You can't make this stuff up. Now, of course, in order to get research funding, you must give a nod to evolution.
This is simply not true. There are hundreds of people who sponsor creationism and creation science, and have funded many experiments hoping to prove a literal interpretation of Genesis.
And your results must support evolution, even if the results don't support evolution, if you get what I'm getting at.
No, if evolution was disproved, it would be the most important scientific discovery for decades. With easily available grant money and a shot at a Nobel Prize, you have to ask, what's stopping them?
For example, in the abstract we read, although we are relatively naked in comparison with other primates, the human body is covered in a layer of fine hair, vellus and terminal hair, and a relatively high follicular density. There are relatively few explanations for the evolutionary maintenance of this type of human hair. Talk about a stretch! Our lack of hair is really unexplainable by evolutionary theory, so we must find some advantage of the lack of human hair to offer an evolutionary explanation. So, what did they find? Well, I like the way Bob Yurka over at Physor.com put it. Not surprisingly, men were better at detecting bed bugs on the unshaved arm due to having thicker and longer hair than women. As to why men are generally hairier looking than women, the researchers suggest it might be due to something as simple as women preferring men with fewer parasites on them, which would imply more hair. Wow.
I'm always amazed at how much creationists think they can get away with. Quoting directly from the article, interesting enough between the two places that Ian Juby quoted from, we find this. Here we experimentally test the hypothesis that human fine body hair plays a defensive function against ectoparasites, bedbugs. So as you can see, this was a small paper testing one hypothesis vaguely related to evolution, which ended up adding to the evidence for evolution.
This report has the potential to affect online dating site profile photos for men, as clearly ladies are after the hairiest guy out there. After all, based on this scientific report, that's what you ladies are after. A hairy guy, which means he's bedbug free, right? Now, this is just another example of how far people are willing to reach to make alleged benefits to be alleged evidence for evolution, even when evolution really cannot explain the evidence, like in this case, the lack of fur on humans.
You just saw the benefit. Also, this is a change that occurred hundreds of thousands of years ago, and probably took tens of thousands of years.
But it sure makes a funny story. YouTuber Potholer54 recently posted a video setting fire to creationist strawmen, which really strikes me as ironic, as he delved into trying to debunk thermodynamics and subsequently burned himself really bad. Potholer definitely needs to be filled in on what thermodynamics is, and in fact, I'll have a rant coming out shortly, mostly devoted to his video, because while his discussion of thermodynamics was so bad and so full of flagrant, gross errors, sadly, his response was typical of the anti-creationary community. But I bring that up along with these snowflakes that Potholer mentioned, because Nature magazine also had an article come out on the incredible variety snowflakes can produce. And just because it's winter here in Canada, what a better time to deal with what we creationists refer to as the stupid snowflake argument. That's right, the claim is that incredibly complex snowflakes can form, therefore the laws of entropy or disorder are violated, therefore we can conclude that life can arise from non-life. But it sure makes a funny story. YouTuber Potholer54 recently posted a video setting fire to creationist strawmen, which really strikes me as ironic, as he delved into trying to debunk thermodynamics and subsequently burned himself really bad. Potholer definitely needs to be filled in on what thermodynamics is, and in fact, I'll have a rant coming out shortly, mostly devoted to his video, because while his discussion of thermodynamics was so bad and so full of flagrant, gross errors, sadly, his response was typical of the anti-creationary community. But I bring that up along with these snowflakes that Potholer mentioned, because Nature magazine also had an article come out on the incredible variety snowflakes can produce. And just because it's winter here in Canada, what a better time to deal with what we creationists refer to as the stupid snowflake argument. That's right, the claim is that incredibly complex snowflakes can form, therefore the laws of entropy or disorder are violated, therefore we can conclude that life can arise from non-life.
I'm sure even you possess a brain capable of understanding this one. If a snowflake can form from a tiny speck of dust, increasing in complexity until it hits the ground, it doesn't violate the second law of thermodynamics, which goes something along the lines of there is a tendency towards chaos in a closed system. This also applies to the Earth. Incredibly complex organisms can form, but eventually the Earth will be engulfed by the Sun, not violating thermodynamics.
Well, of course, Potholer first pulled the open systems argument, claiming that energy coming in from the Sun can cause life to arise.
That is a bare-faced lie. Here is what Potholer54 actually says.
Now, there really is no definitive version of the second law, so wording does vary. But no one, apart from creationists, has ever defined the second law as the whole universe running down into complete disorder. After all, we only need to look around us to see that that isn't the case. Plant a sunflower seed, and it grows into a flower that can turn to face the sun. When water evaporates and rises haphazardly into the atmosphere, it turns into exquisitely ordered snowflakes. Volcanic explosions, the very definition of chaos and disorder, can produce beautiful crystal geodes. So given that we can see this happening all around us all the time, who in their right minds would devise a law that says none of this is happening? And why in 100 years of science hasn't anyone spotted that the law doesn't conform to reality? The answer is either that scientists are all stupid, or that the atheist antidote, copying straight from Henry Morris, got the definition wrong. In fact, reality complies very nicely with the second law of thermodynamics, which says there's a tendency towards disorder in a closed system. And evolution complies very nicely also, on two counts. First, there is a tendency towards disorder in the universe, because the brief period life exists on Earth before our planet is consumed by an expanding and dying sun won't affect that tendency towards disorder at all. Secondly, the Earth receives energy from the sun, so it isn't a closed system.
Almost all the energy that you use in your everyday life came through the sun, and so we can see that the Earth is not a closed system, and therefore is not subject to the laws of thermodynamics.
Well, of course, Potholer first pulled the open systems argument, claiming that energy coming in from the sun can cause life to arise, and then cites snowflakes and sunflowers as examples? This makes it evident that Potholer doesn't have a clue what he's talking about. First of all, as I already pointed out in a previous rant, closed thermodynamic systems do not exist.
Correct. However, isolated systems, like the solar system, do exist which act exactly like closed systems. Your point was?
The well-established laws of thermodynamics were formed to describe what happens in open systems.
The definition of the second law of thermodynamics is that in a closed system there is a tendency towards chaos.
So why then would Potholer talk about closed systems? I can only think of two possible reasons: ignorance or obfuscation. Snowflakes form by cooling. Yet Potholer was calling upon energy from the sun to magically defy disorder. Energy from the sun plays a role in evaporation of water, yes, but energy from the sun melts snowflakes. Then Potholer takes a quantum leap of faith, comparing a snowflake to the sunflower. What? That's like saying that because a rock formed by natural processes, we can therefore conclude that the space shuttle can also form by natural processes. And even that crude comparison doesn't do it justice, because the space shuttle cannot reproduce, cannot repair itself, cannot find and process its own energy, etc. You know what the odds are that the space shuttle can form by natural processes? Well, it's quite easy to calculate, actually. The odds are 0 that the space shuttle could form by natural processes. And so it goes even with the very proteins that the sunflower needs in order to live. But, to be honest, perhaps we should temper those odds with the fact that Kim Jong-il got 11 holes in one in his first game of golf. I wouldn't have thought that was possible either.
Thank you for one of the most poorly executed strawmen I've ever seen. I have linked to Potholer 54's video down below, so you can see what he actually says.
Snowflakes most certainly do follow the laws of thermodynamics and entropy, and snowflakes have absolutely nothing to do with life forming from non-life. Thanks for coming out.
No, they explain very well how thermodynamics and evolution coexist.